Hello everyone, this is Sandman here from Inflectra. We're going to be talking about Spira, the latest features and enhancements. So what's been new in 6.12, 6.13, and 6.14? Okay, with that being said, let's go look at our agenda today. So, as I said, we've released, since the last webinar, we've released 6.12, 6.13, and 6.14, with 6.14 being released in December. We haven't done a release in January. We skipped the month. Our 6.15 release will be coming out in February. That's a relatively minor release, and a much larger release will be coming out in March. Right, it's either going to be 6.16 or it might be version 7. Ooh, sneak peek, you heard it here. Anyway, we're going to come back to that in a future month. But for right now, let's go through what's in this webinar. So in Spira 6, 12, 13, and 14 collectively, we've done a few things. We first of all released some additional single sign-on providers, one for the OneLogin service, one for generic OpenID. I'll explain what that means. We also have completely relaunched and revamped the text editor. And we released an updated version in 6.13. We did find a couple of quirks with it, which we fixed in 6.14. And there's a few more things we'll be doing in 6.15 around performance, and I can explain that as well. But this is the text editor that's used throughout the application. It's called CK Editor, and we've now moved to CK Editor 5. That gets us a lot of new features out of the box, and also paves the way for us to add some requested features like meta tags and at mentions. We can now do that in the editor. And that's a prerequisite. So this new version is a prerequisite for some of this new functionality. On the planning side, we've also added the ability to edit releases and tasks on the various chart views, Gantt, Pert. We did this already for boards, so everything now becomes interactive rather than read-only. We also came across a need for more custom property types, particularly the ability to have a encrypted password field for test data that we're sending to test automation tools like Rapise. And at the same time, we decided it made sense to also add custom properties for releases and automation hosts. We've got some new exciting sample data. This is really more for people trying the software for the first time. So if you are a new customer of ours, you'll have this feature, or if you're a partner of ours and you have customers that are coming to you for new installations or trials, then you can use this to help them guide their trial, and it makes it much easier. On the document management side, we've improved the diagram editor to include some new types of diagrams. We also have made some major changes to the requirements hierarchy. Those last two bullets are really the same thing, just to sort of describe it a different way. The way the requirements types work and the way the hierarchy works is a little bit different. And one of the things this does is it makes it much easier to handle support for safe or scaled agile. So that's what we're going to be talking about. I don't have slides for this today. I'm going to go straight into the live application. I think it's always more interesting to see things live in the system. I'm going to go through them one by one. So with that, let's leave PowerPoint behind, move into the browser, and let's see what we've done. So the first thing I mentioned is single sign-on. So single sign-on is a feature we added a couple of years ago where you can use the OAuth OpenID standard to connect different providers. And if you go into the administration menu, 1 second, let's make sure it's all visible. Yep, you can see that, good. So if you go to the administration menu for system administrators, which is down here, and you go to login providers, you'll see the different kinds of login provider. And the ones I'm going to highlight in dark blue already existed in the system. So if you were using Microsoft Azure AD or ADFS or GitHub, GitLab, Google, or Okta, you were all set. Now, the two problems came about. One is that one of our prospective clients, now a client, was looking to use OneLogin, which is a different flavor of OAuth. It's very similar actually to Okta, but it's a competitor, but it just has slightly different what we call grants. It doesn't support a few of the grants that Okta does, and so we didn't have a way for them to use our OAuth single sign-on. So we have released now a specific OneLogin provider. In doing that, we also found out there are many times other providers that customers have either built themselves, they're in-house, or they're just another third party, but not as popular as the ones listed. And in many cases, they can still use single sign-on because OAuth is a standard. And unless you've made extensions to it, like Microsoft, where you've broken or deviated from the standard, there's no reason why you couldn't use it. So what we did is we looked at the minimum set required for OpenID to work, and we've now made a generic OpenID Connect provider. So if you have a customer that wants to use single sign-on and they're not using SAML, because SAML we don't support, but if they're using OAuth 2/OpenID Connect and it isn't one of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 named providers, don't worry. Just tell them to use OpenID Connect and it should work unless they've made any custom extensions to it. And that means we now pretty much can support any kind of OAuth provider. So that way, a user wants to log in, they can go to the provider and turn it on. And so what you do is, as you go in here, you put in the client ID, the client secret, you put in the authorization URL, the token URL, the profile URL. We have documentation of all of this. And then when you come to the machine to log in, you will use that login button instead of our login. And away you go. And we have an article on this as well. So if you want to go to our website, you can search on OneLogin. And we have a nice blog article on this new provider, like that. And you can see we'll add a login button like we do before. And now it goes to the OneLogin page. You authenticate with OneLogin as normal, and it then redirects you back into Spira. And for OpenID Connect, it's exactly the same. It will just show a box specific to the OAuth provider that you're using. So again, it's a little hard to demo that live, but that's basically a new set of providers for OneLogin and a generic case for customers or partners who have clients that are, have an in-house solution or a third party that's just not as well known as the 7 we have. Okay, now the major feature we have that's that's changed in the system is, of course, the rich text editor. We've used CK Editor for quite a while. We added that, I think, in version 6.0 about 3 or 4 years ago now. And we were using CK Editor 4, which has been around for a while, and we decided it made sense to adopt the latest version. So when you go into the system, let's say we go into a requirement, I'll go on one right here, it'll open up. It looks like this. It's slightly different. It comes in 2 flavors, in case you're wondering. There is the first flavor, which is we call the inline version. So let me go to one that's editable. Those are completed. Let me go to one that's not. Yep, here we go. So there's 2 versions. There's an inline version, which looks like this. So you're thinking, where's the editor? The inline version is really great when you want to see the text written inline and you don't want to have too much unnecessary Chrome, especially because often the requirements description is something you're reading. You're not necessarily editing it all the time. Whereas the standard non-inline version looks like the notes box you see here or the comments box you see here. It has the border, it has the toolbar always, and so that way it's very visible for editing, but obviously it's not quite as pleasant to read. And so if you click on the inline one, it basically turns into an editable one. So we have both flavors, one that's effectively relatively invisible, designed to make reading easier, and we have one that's more visible, designed to make editing more obvious that you can do it. Obviously, we can switch them both to be inline or switch them both to be fully visible. So if you have feedback on that, if you'd like them both to be always visible and not be inline, we can look at that too. There are some differences between this and the old editor. First of all, variable height. So if you have lots of text, guess what? You can see it all, which is great, because the old version, if you remember, it was always fixed height. I mean, you could drag it, but by default, it was fixed height, and it required scrolling. So that was kind of a pain. So that's made that better. Notice that when you have the inline one, it changes height dynamically, and there's no need for a full screen. Whereas on the one that's not inline, there is still the full screen option. Now, for those of you who may remember, there were some bugs with the old one. If you're using Firefox and you went full screen and back, suddenly all the links stopped working on the page. It was a weird bug with the text editor. We had no idea why. We've upgraded the new version of the editor. It's all gone away. There was another weird issue you may have seen. Occasionally with the old editor, if you paste it in text, it would duplicate and triplicate. So you typed in some text and it would appear 3 times. And we didn't know why. Again, it wasn't our editor, it's a third-party app. The new version fixes that sporadic issue that we saw, makes it much better. So that's some of the benefits, is basically that it fixed a lot of bugs, and it also has the dynamic scrolling. It's also got lots of formatting options. So if you go into it, you've got the ability to set the font, you can set the core style. It's also got abilities to do font sizing, bold, italics, underline, strike through. A lot of good formatting options are available. It's got the font color. It's got the background color. It's got a highlight color, which is separate, which we didn't have before. You can still put links in. You can still paste pictures in. You can still do quoted text. And you can still develop tables. So all that is very similar to what we had before. You can also do code highlighting and create code just like we could before, but now you can choose the language right off the bat, which is nice. And we also, for the first time now, have an video embed option. So if you want to embed a YouTube video inside of Spira, you can now do that. And that way, it makes adding video links much easier. And there's also undo functionality. Also, it has fixed some of the issues with links. In the past, for example, if I'm in my description and I want to make a hyperlink, people always complain that if I had a link, www.https, www.inflectra.com, like that, which is nice. The problem was the link wasn't easy, it wasn't clickable. We save that. Oh, I need to put a value in. So this, and the new editor makes it much easier to deal with hyperlinks than before. So you now have the option to click on it and go straight to the link. So previously, if you remember with the editor, you had a hyperlink here, and people would be like, how do I get to this link to work? I can't click on it. It doesn't go anywhere. And that was just the way the editor worked. It was really great because it let you, view the text in line. But if you had hyperlinks and a user was like, click, click, it literally didn't do anything. If you remember, you had to edit the link. But now you have the option. You can still edit the link, obviously, if you have permissions. But otherwise, you now do have the option just of clicking on it and going to the URL you want to go to. So that's really improved the link usability. Another thing this version of the editor does is it also cleans the text and makes it much more readable. And so if you're pasting in from things like Microsoft Word or other tools, it actually actively cleans what's going in, so you don't get all this bad HTML. And that's not usually a big deal, except when you start to generate reports in things like PDF or Microsoft Word. Sometimes that would create weird formatting when it gets converted into Word or PDF. So it streamlines a lot of that as well. So that's the new editor. A few things we are working on that people have noticed. One is people have noticed that when it's inline, it is a little invisible to see. So in version 6.15 that's coming out next month, one of the small tweaks is I believe we put a small gray border around it to improve it. We've also upgraded to the next minor version of the editor. We fixed a few other things that people have noticed as well, like image resizing and image editing. So there's a few tweaks coming in the future. But this new editor is a major improvement. One thing it does do, which we've noticed, is it does make the page load slightly slower. So if you refresh this page, you'll notice that it takes a little bit of time for the page to appear, like it looks like this for a short time. We have recognized that. So if you're seeing that, that is because of this new editor. And in 6.15 coming out next month, we've got a fix for that. So it will actually load faster. So a few things where you've noticed the speed on the test of editing or this page or the detail pages, we have noticed that, and it was due to the editor upgrade, and we have addressed that. So that's the new editor, both what we've done and what's the few tweaks that are coming. Now let's move on to the editing of releases and tasks. Okay, so let's say you're on let's go to requirements. Let's stay with the requirements first of all. Let's say I'm on the requirements view. I'm not on this view, but I'm actually on the mind map view. You can now edit the requirements on the mind map. So you're right here and you go, wow, this is useful. This is a nice requirement. Ability to add books. I'd love to edit it or add a comment to it. How do I do that? Well, you can obviously click on the link. That would open up the page. That's really slow and not particularly usable. Now you click on it, you get an inline editor. Because this one is completed and the workflow makes it read-only, you actually can't edit this one. So that's okay. If I go down here to another one that's newer, this one is not completed, so I can edit it, make changes. I can add comments, hit save. And then if I want to view to the detail page, I can click on this link, and that takes me to the full screen, separate URL page of that particular requirement. So that's the way it would normally work before. But now I've got this inline way of editing, which is just much faster than having to go here at this page. So we did that on the mind map. We've also done it on if you go to releases, we've done it on the release per chart. So if you go to release and choose this option, the mind map / per chart version, you'll see right here, there's the view. Click on that. These are editable. And I think most importantly now, if you go to the Gantt chart views, these were previously read-only. You can now go to a Gantt chart and you've got the option to, first of all, click on a release and edit it. So I want to edit sprint 1, change the dates, change information. You can do that right here on the left-hand side, or you click on the right-hand side, you can do the same thing. Or you can now add a release. So let's say I wanted to add a sprint under release 1. That was very, you couldn't do that before here. Now you can say, okay, release 1.1, let me add a new sprint. Like that. Sprint 4. Oops, I can't spell. Sprint 4. Hit save, and there you go. Oops. Something like that. And that will add that sprint now over here. So you can add things in line and you can edit in line. You want to refresh. Also the release selector, which was previously read-only, that's now editable. And if you go to the task view, same thing is available now on the task version. You go to the task chart over here in the Gantt chart right here, that's now editable. Now there is a difference on the release Gantt chart, which only shows releases. You can add releases and add sprints. On the task one, you can view releases and sprints, obviously, but you can't add them. This is where you add tasks instead. So it's slightly different. So if you go to sprint 3 and you see, look, there's sprint 3, here's some items. Let me add a new task to sprint 3. You can go new task and say, need to, I don't know, update the documentation in sprint 3. We'll put that as a, I guess it's more of a management task. Make management do the documentation. Hit add task, and now it's going to add that under sprint 3 right there. So basically, it lets you add things really easily into the system, and you can still filter right here as well. So that's the Gantt chart editing. You can add on the Gantt chart, you can edit on the Gantt chart, you can edit on the mind map / Pert charts, and you can do that for releases, for requirements, and for tasks. Okay, so next let's talk about custom properties. So custom properties, those are available throughout the system. If you notice, we also have moved them. Previously, custom properties lived here under custom properties. You clicked on it and you chose the type. We found that because you are so often doing custom properties and then using a workflow with them, we've made all the customization options now under the appropriate artifacts section, except for the types of custom property that don't have their own artifact section. So test steps, test sets, and runs, these don't have their own heading. So to edit those custom properties, you use this section. Otherwise, it's right here under each artifact. And we found that just is more usable because usually when you're editing workflows, you want to edit custom properties at the same time. So if we go to, for example, a test case, though, we can now add different kinds of custom property. So let's go to custom properties. And we go to add definition. And now you'll notice, as well as the text, integer, decimal, Boolean, date, list, and multi-select list, which we had before, and user, sorry, before, we now have password, release, date and time, and automation host. So password is if you want to have text that's encrypted. This is useful because you might want to have some sensitive information that you sent to an automation script. For example, one of our clients was using this to pass a GitHub login to Rapise to do some automation, but it could be for other things, like it could be a social security number or something like that that needs to be in the system for test data, but you actually want it to go to Rapise, but it's not to be visible to a user. So we'll put sensitive data is the name of our custom property. We'll add that. Other examples are you can also add a automation host. That can be useful if you want to basically have a custom automation host added to something. And one of the use cases here was for hardware testing. We had some clients that were like, well, I want to be able to run these tests on different types of machines, physical devices. And you can use a custom property for that, a list of devices, but you also want to have meta information around those different devices. So you can actually now create a custom property of type automation host, and you can use that for like test equipment. And then you can have all this information associated with the host, like that. That's useful too. So, and then the other things we can do is we can also add a release, because maybe we want to release, we have the plan release for a requirement, maybe you want to have the obsolete release. So maybe, or in this case, it's a test case. So we'll just say, test release, maybe. But you can add another release field. And if you go here, you can then use the last one, which I think is date and time right here. So it could be, because now we have date and time. Like that. Hit save. And now if we go to a test case, we'll see the various fields. All right. We do put the dates and times in the date and time field. So now you can put a custom property with date and time, which you could previously was only date. Now you can have a no, that's there before, sensitive data, which would be help. Oh no, let's say it would be my password, say. And immediately, so you notice as soon as I put it in there, it blurs. And the test equipment would be the automation hosts, like that. Hit save. And there it is. Refresh just to show you the page. And those are the new property types. Password, test equipment, date time. Oh, and release, sorry. There's also releases. Forgot to show you that as well. And if you want to view that, you can click on it and it is editable, and then it clicks away, it becomes blurred again. So those are the new custom property types we added. Now, we also added industry-specific sample data. I'll come back to that because I need a new install for that, not this one. So we'll come back then, diagram editing. So if you go to the planning documents, we've got in the document editor, as you know, we can add the URL, screenshot, you can upload a file or image. You can write markdown wiki pages, rich text, you can do gherkin feature files, and then we have diagrams. So we've had diagrams for at least a few versions, but we've added some new types of diagrams. So if I go sample diagram, just create one. Once it opens up, we've got the various shapes, and we've now added the groups. So the groups in the swim lanes are the new thing. So you can take a group, stick it over here, and then you can put shapes in the group, like that, and it moves with the group. Look at that. So you can do, and then the swim lanes are useful if you want to mock up a process, like a Kanban board or something. We use this for documenting process flows, or I don't know, you do this way, like that, and you can then stick people, like imagine you have like people or objects or cards, you can put those inside the swim lanes. And it's great for mocking up a process or just some kind of diagram, very useful for being able to group different artifacts into a diagram and then move it around. So it just gives you more flexibility now in creating diagrams that are more sophisticated with grouping, swim lanes, both vertical and horizontal, and or a full combination, which you can do a checkerboard. So if you've got a table where you're going to put like some different X and Y categories, this could be useful if you're mocking up like a board and you want to show what's in each of the sections, really useful. Or if it's just some kind of categorization where you want X and Y categorization, you've got that option right here. Let me delete that, put that in, and then you can stick into these different sections the different things. Like, for example, maybe I'm going to put that in there, put that in there, put that in there, change the color. And this one will change the fill, like that. So again, lots of options, and now just got better with the grouping. So enhancements to the diagram editor to improve, again, the range of diagrams you can create with it. You can still create mind maps and organization charts as well, which is a slightly different template. Okay, that's documents. And then before the last of the features then that are not about sample data, if we go into requirements, one of the big changes we've made, which has come from many users over the years, has been let's have the ability to change the feature type and the typing. So previously on Spira, if you had a requirement that was a non-parent, meaning it had the diamond icon, the blue diamond, not this parent icon sort of style, what it would happen is if I try to edit the lowest level, I can change the type. This is currently a user story. This one at the top would always be, depending on the version you had, it was either a package or it was an epic. Originally they were called packages, then we made them epics. It wasn't really flexible. If you're doing agile, you might want an epic, but maybe you're doing scaled agile and you want feature epic story. Maybe you're doing traditional requirements. You don't want it to be epic. It's not an epic. It's a collection of non-functional requirements. It just wasn't very flexible. So we've now divorced the parent versus non-parent status of it, which is the icon, from its type. So now I can make the type at the top any style I want, any type I want, and it's irrespective of if it's a parent or not. So now you can have any of the types at any of the levels, which is great. So it lets you support, for example, scaled agile, you might have feature story epic, whereas on a traditional project, you might have something completely different. So depending on the type of project you're using, as you can see here, if I go to my sample save product, we've got this mocked up with feature epic story, like that. Other products may have completely different organizations. You now have the flexibility. Now, what that does mean is the status of the parent is still driven by the child requirement. So if you click on an epic, you still can't change its status because it's driven by the children automatically, which is correct. But the type is now editable. So this gives a lot of flexibility and gets around some of the common issues we had in the past where people were trying to make it fit different methodologies, and it just wasn't as flexible, particularly for essential safe. And And as a result of that, we have added a new column, because one of the things you could do then was see if it was a parent or not, because if it was an epic, it had a different type. So there's no way apart from the icon of seeing that. So we do have now a show is parent column. So we've now got a separate filterable column, which is parent or not parent, and you can filter on it. Particularly on the sortable view, where you might want to filter on it, and out of the hierarchy, you could say, show me only the parents, look at that. Show me only the children, look at that. And that's irrespective of the type. So you can now do things like, I want to find any feature that is a parent or not a parent. And previously there was no way of doing both of those, because literally it was the same thing. So it's got a lot more flexibility and gives you much more power. So that's the way that works. The other thing from an administration standpoint would be, if you're a new customer with a new, or you created a new product, we have added a new built-in default type called epic. So there's now a real type called epic. That does mean, however, if you have upgraded an existing project, then it won't have epic, it will be missing that. And so if you want to get it the parent called epic, you have to now create an actual real type called epic. Previously, there was a fake virtual type, so whatever type it originally was, it got switched to epic. That doesn't happen. So it does mean for existing products only, you will need to potentially create a new epic type if you want to have epics at the parent level. Okay, that's all the functionality for existing customers. There is one new feature which really affects more new customers, or new instances at least, for an existing customer, and that's the sample data. So to show you this in action, I have signed up for a trial version of Spira, and hopefully it's ready. So I'm going to fire that up while we're waiting, and it should be demo-us webinar. I just signed up for it. It's going to take a few minutes for it to be ready, because it's spitting up for the first time. This feature is really cool. What it does is it lets you see different kinds of sample data, and once the instance is loaded with the sample data, you can then customize which you want to see later as well. So for an existing, if you go into the administration menu, you'll have the option to set this up. If you don't see the options, it means that your product already has the sample data deleted, or it's been used and the sample data is no longer available for reconfiguration. So it's really for new customers and new instances. If you started using the tool for real, it won't be available, because you'll actually have the real data instead of the sample data. And what we've done is we've created sample data for different entries and types. So while waiting for that to load, let me see if we have any questions. I can answer some of those while we're waiting. Let's see, questions. Okay, first one. Hi, Marcus. When will the requirement workflow get the same functionality as the instance, the ability to create states? So that's a good question. People have asked us this for a while. So we can edit requirement types. You can edit requirement task types. You can edit test case types. One thing you can't do right now is you can't edit the statuses. So if you go here, you'll see, look, requirements and test cases, and they have workflow type, but no status. Well, if you go to incidents, you can edit the status like this. So the reason we haven't done it already, because obviously we could have done this years ago, the reason we haven't done it currently is that in Spira there is some orchestration between the different fields. So for example, if you have a requirement and it's in a status of, let's show you, if it's in a status of under review or accepted, and you assign a release to it, it automatically goes to planned. If it's in planned and you start adding tasks and the tasks start getting done, it goes to in progress. And if you move it from in progress, if you finish all the tasks, it goes automatically to developed. And once all the test cases pass, it automatically goes to tested. These automations are built into the system. They can be turned off by going to planning options and turning off some of these automations. But if you do that, you have to make all these changes manually. So you complete all the tasks. Now you got to update the requirements. You run all the tests, they pass. Now you got to manually update the requirements. So the idea of these orchestrations is to make things easier and more nimble. The downside is, because there's dependencies between these statuses, it's very difficult for us to make them customizable, because if you customize them, we wouldn't know what orchestrations to support. So basically what we're looking at is, how can we allow you to add your own requirement statuses and types, but still keep the benefit of the automations. And we are looking at ways to do that, and that's the reason why we haven't done it. So it is something we hope to do, but we need to make sure we can do it in a way that doesn't break some of the automations that we have. One thing we are going to be doing, which is not exactly the same, but may make this easier to happen in the future, would be We are going to be adding support for plugins. So particularly if you've come from the Atlassian ecosystem where you can have plugins in the app, we are going to be releasing plugins, and we've got some sneak peeks of that on our website and the blog, where you'll be able to have other applications appear in the Spira UI and have code that executes. So we're implementing a plugin model, so we could have initially ourselves, but eventually third-party developers can extend Spira. So one of the things we can do with that is that we could then potentially move some of these orchestrations and automations into a plugin, giving us the flexibility to then make the statuses more customizable. So there are some dependencies on some of these other things we're doing. Once those are in place, I think it will give us a lot more flexibility and freedom to allow new states to be added, renaming states, which I know Marcus has mentioned, which is a question that does come up a lot. So I appreciate that. Oh, and Remco said, thanks, nice set of changes. Thanks, Remco, I appreciate it. Always appreciate your feedback. Okay. So I want to show you the sample data, and I'll come back to questions. So this is a new sample instance of Spira that I just signed up for on our cloud platform, version 6.14. So I'm going to log in with the default user as if I literally got this fresh, and hopefully I don't forget the password. There you go. And when you first come in, it's going to say, "Hey, welcome." And what it does, it says, what industry are you in? What sample data do you want to see? This is the new thing. So you can say, okay, well, the basic samples are the library information system. I want the core systems, but I'm working in life sciences. Hey, you know what? I'm a consultant. I'm working in all these industries. Give me everything. So now you say, give me all the sample data. Hit save. It's now going to reconfigure the system. And if I go to the workspace, look at that. All the sample data is here. And you can say, hey, I'm working in pharmaceuticals. Let's look at a sample pharmaceutical product. Look at that. Yeah. That makes sense. Manufacturing, quality, purity, yield, audit chain, patient-oriented outcomes. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's say I'm working in aerospace. I'm building a flight control system, which, if you know me, is pretty scary because I'm a bad driver already. If I build a flight control system, you don't want to be in my plane. But seriously, though, here's the a flight control system. If you we're doing an ERP upgrade of a financial system, maybe we're moving from Oracle to SAP. Oh, look, there you go. Look at that. Chart of accounts, general ledger, accounts payable. That looks pretty good to me. And let's pick another one. Lastly, I'm building a space telemetry system. My son does this for a living, for real. So he can check this out. But look at that. Code detection on the downlink, the uplink, satellite connections, pretty neat stuff. So we got some good sample data here. Obviously, it is sample data. But it means if you're looking, particularly if you're a consultant or working across different industries, when a customer comes in now, you can say, oh, log in, come into the system, you can choose your industry, get the right data, and that also makes it just much easier to get going. You get to see the application in the flavor that you want. Is it agile? Is it waterfall? Does it have sprints? Does it have releases? The methodology also matches the sample data of that particular product. And then, of course, if you want to change your mind, there is a way to change the sample data. Now, on the instance I was running before, because that was an instance we've already been using, the sample data has all been changed, you lose that option. So once it detects that the sample data has been changed and you've been using it, you won't get the option to do this. But otherwise, you can go in and say, manage sample data. This is also useful if you just did what I did and got all these samples. You're like, oh my goodness, there are too many. They can go away. So you can go in here and say, actually, I'm really working in financial services and life sciences, and that's all I'm doing, and I don't need these ones. So you can always go in here, and then eventually, when you're ready to go live, people always tell us, oh, I have all these users in the system. Who are they? Who's Fred Blogs? What's this guy doing here? You've now got the option to delete all the sample data too. So you can use this to get going. Once you've understood the system and like it and love it, you can now hit the delete button, and now you've got a clean instance ready to rock. So that's the sample data thing. Okay, moving on to the questions, or back to the questions. Mike Rolls, hey Mike, is there a product or program level custom parameters that would help address product relationships in the system? We are looking to add this year custom properties on the products themselves, on the programs themselves, on the portfolios themselves, and on the users. So it does not exist in this version. It is something we're going to do this year. So the idea is, if you look at the workspaces, as we call them, the products, the programs, if you're a SpiraPlan user, you get portfolios, also users. there will be a new kind of custom property, a bit like the custom properties we have in the products, in the workspace, but will now be available for the workspace itself. So you can now have something like, well, this product is this kind of product, this is that kind of product, it's a packaged app, custom app, ERP, Oracle, SAP, and that's getting us to improve. That will really improve our program and portfolio management, because you can also do things like, track financials, track budgets, track business value. So you'll be able to have ways of slicing and dicing the actual workspaces and the users that go with them, with things like, oh, this is a C++ product. I have a C++ user. Let me see if we have anyone available. So it's really all part of our program portfolio management and resource management. Having custom properties at the workspace level is the first key big building block for that. And for that, you will need SpiraPlan. So if you are on a SpiraTeam and test and you say, hey, I really want to have my products have custom properties, well, I would look at SpiraPlan and get ready to budget for the upgrade, because that unfortunately will only be in the SpiraPlan version. As I say, with great power comes great responsibility. I think Spider-Man said that, or Spider-Man's Uncle Ben said that. Okay, that's all of the things for today's webinar. So let's see, any other questions? Just to recap, while waiting for questions to roll in, we talked about the single sign-on, the new text editor, the ability to edit releases, tasks, inline on the Gantt chart and Pert chart views, and also requirements too. We talked about the different custom property types. We looked at the new sample data just now, the diagrams, additional shapes, also the fact that requirements, particularly the parent requirement types, now support scaled agile in a better way, because you can customize the different types that parent requirements are using. There are a whole bunch of other bug fixes and smaller enhancements. So if you do go to the roadmap or to the release notes of Spira, you will see a lot more than what I've gone through. I've gone through primarily the main big feature items. And if ever you want to know what's going on, you go to SpiraDoc, you go to About, go to go to Release Notes, and you'll see what's in 6.14, what's in 6.13, and what's in 6.12. And if you want to see what's coming up in the future, you can go to the roadmap, and that will show you what's coming. Right now, because we're doing a big planning effort at the beginning of the year, 6.15 is not yet listed and what's coming. So this is going to be updated in the next few weeks. So I would come back to this page, but certainly the release notes up to 6.14 are all current and accurate. Okay, so I don't see any other questions. I'm going to give it a minute. If there aren't any, I'm going to say thanks everyone for joining today for today's webinar on Spira 6.14, 13, and 12. And thanks, Brigitte. I try to make it lighthearted if I can. And hopefully we'll see you at an event. One last plug, Tay will kill me if I don't mention this. We do have InflectraCon in person in Washington, D.C., May 5th and 6th. Who knows what the world's going to look like, but I'm hopeful that things will be better. If they are better and people can travel, we are holding this in-person event, 2-day conference in the Washington, D.C. area, May 5th and 6th. All attendees will have to be vaccinated, and it's going to, at least as of current rules today, and it's going to be 2 days of industry talks, training on Spira, and lots of exciting networking events, fun activities, a city tour, and just a great chance to reconnect. So those of you who are in the United States, we'd love to see you. For those overseas, we can try. Hopefully we can see you as well. In addition, we are hoping to go to lots of different events this year. We're going to be at Star East, Star West, Agile DevOps East, Agile DevOps West. So shout out there to the Tech World crowd. We're also going to be at Agile Testing Days in Germany. Maybe it's Swiss Testing Days with a partner at JFTL in France, maybe something in London. Again, we don't know how the world's going to be. If you're at any of those events, look us up. We should have a booth, and we hope to see you there. But again, I don't know what the world's going to look like. But if you are at any of those events, please come say hi. We'll have some great swag, and we can answer your questions, and you can tell us all your feedback in person. So have a great rest of the day. And again, the recording of this is on the YouTube channel and will be available along with this in the next couple of days. So thanks, and have a great rest of the day.